right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the final talk in the big auditorium at LightBox Expo 2023. Boy, are we in for a treat. Every story holds a power, a magic that transports, transforms, and transcends. Today, we bring you the maestros who wield this power with an unparalleled grace and genius. We're going to be delving into the Superpower story by helping me welcome the incredible Jorge Gutierrez, Peter Ramsey, and the incredible Phil Lord, moderated by Pietro Schito. But first, we have this wonderful little intro that we'd like to start off with. So please enjoy.
Of all the tasks that go toward making a motion picture, that of the screenwriter is the most fundamental, the most basic, and the loneliest.
Hello.
Hey.
What's happening? So welcome everybody. My name is Pietro. I am the Padawan in this group for sure. I'm so excited to be here. And I started this YouTube channel, and then I got to bump into these wonderful people that are heroes to me, and it's such an honor to be here. So what we are going to talk today is the wonderful art. Thank you, Jorge. The wonderful art of screenwriting, and we'll start with a great tweet from Jorge celebrating the art. Tell us a little bit about this. What's going on?
It's funny, backstage I just found out Phil is my age. We're both 48, and he's been my hero. So it's weird to have a hero that is...
You're my hero.
So imagine two babies, right? And like one baby tells the other baby, like, "You're my hero." And then the Phil baby poops his diaper.
We're also two 48-year-old men who look like children.
And I'm older than both of them, and they're both my heroes.
There we go. It's a very confusing day.
And you three are my heroes.
All right, screenwriting.
So
to me, the symbolism of that image was profound in that I think when you're writing, the beauty and horror of screenwriting is that you have too many ideas. And these ideas are so heavy sometimes that they will literally weigh you down. So editing these ideas into something cohesive, when people say, you got a horrible expression, but you got to kill your babies, I don't think that expression does justice to how difficult it really is. Because making a baby is super fun.
The first part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
it starts great.
Yeah, it starts great.
But it feels, after you kill them, it weirdly feels really good. So maybe that's me, I don't know.
But the grand tragedy of writing, honestly, is, and I think in artwork, you can see it, right? You can see a piece, and you can see a drawing, you can see a painting, you can see something, and you go, don't touch it. It's good enough, it's perfect. If you add one more blah, blah, you'll ruin it. In writing, you never have that. And the problem in writing is, and I learned this from you guys.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It can always be better. And that is horrible, because at some point, they take it away from you, right? If it was up to any of us, I don't think we would ever finish these things. So you make a movie when they take it away from you because there's a release date, or you're running out of money, or something happens. But I think all of us believe if you keep polishing, it keeps getting better. And I don't think that equates to a performance. I don't think that equates to a drawing. I don't think that equates to anything visual. It's purely in the writing. And then the worst part of it, the worst part of it is when you get ideas and it's too late. Right? Because you go, oh my God, if we would have done this in Act 2, blah, 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 and you're literally at the premiere.
Yeah.
That's why once you're done, I never watch the movie.
Really?
Oh my, because I'll just sit there and go, oh man, we should have moved. The second act should be the third act should be the first act, and then, now I'm miserable for a lifetime.
And then I also think in writing, it's the only profession where the process is so horrible, right? The actual, the writing of it is so painful, but the result, if you get it right, it's like, again, it's like having a baby. You forget the poopy diapers, you forget the throw up in the face, you forget all that stuff, and you only remember the super cute, beautiful moments. So I always say, having a baby is, for every, poop in the mouth, it's 10 glorious moments. I think that's writing.
Yeah, and it is true that the best part is at the beginning.
Yeah.
At the blank page, and I love the mark making of screenwriting. It's really fun, and I try to remind myself of that, when you have to rewrite that scene. Yeah. You go all right, great, I get to do it again. And a lot of times, I won't look at the existing version of the scene, I'll start over. Because I want to have that joy of inventing something.
Man, that
instead of the
explains a lot.
torture of
Right.
oh, I have to cut the line that made my mom laugh, So
Or my favorite joke is...
Right, you just go oh, good, I get to do it again. And that that version of the screenplay or that version of the scene, that is out there in the universe somehow. It's between me and my God, and I showed my friend, and they laughed, and that has to be good enough. And then you're on to the next.
Is that a muscle you developed?
Yes.
While working
It's a defense mechanism. I have, by the way, a painting that I bought from an artist named Thomas Lawson. It's an LA guy, I think teaches at Cal Arts. And it's like this. It looks a lot like me. It's this. And the title is called The Dreamer. And I said, no, it's not. That's the writer. And I bought it.
It's so funny though I remember when I was first starting to write and just being paralyzed about getting the sentences right and the moments, and really getting into this thing where every single move you could make, every keystroke is it's just paralyzing. And then after years of doing that, thinking that way, just realizing, wait a minute, they're just pixels on a screen. They don't actually exist. You can throw all this away and do exactly what Phil just did, and the moment you have that realization, it's so freeing. I mean, it's all just imaginary, and there's no limit to the number of ideas you're going to have. You're not going to suddenly stop having ideas, and oh my God, I can't think of anything else, man. They're going to keep coming, just like Jorge says. So,
I try to write fast.
Right.
I don't know about you guys. I try to what's the quickest, first thought, best thought version of this, is I know we're going to put it through the paces later.
Like the vomit draft.
Yeah, and you don't want to first of all, they're all vomit drafts. But you don't want to be if you exactly. If you handcrafted every semicolon, then it's no fun to put it through the paces.
I think early on I would I read this quote that was try to make the movie on the page, right? So because of magical worlds and magical characters, I would try to describe all those things, right? So you enter this land and it's tasting, a baby tasting sugar for the first time. I had all these crazy, the day you lost your virginity, that's what this moment feels like.
That's what it looks like.
In a good way, right? So.
I feel triggered.
And as you get older, you're who am I writing this for? Right? The reader doesn't care about any of this. So now it's enters the party. Because it doesn't matter. What matters is, I used to put way too much emphasis on what is the script, and honestly, I used to put a lot of emphasis on dialogue, and now as I got older, I think, some people hate when I say this, but I think dialogue's overrated. I think especially in a universal, international world, my favorite movies are not in English, and my favorite movies are not in Spanish, and I love those stories, and I love those characters. It's not the dialogue, right? It's the movie, and it's those moments.
It's the story.
Yeah, it's the story.
It's still writing, even if it's not people talking. You know, whatever happens on screen, hey, guess what? you thought of it, that's writing.
You know, something that I've heard from both all of you is that we have a lot of artists. How many artists are here that draw and have artistic skills?
Yeah.
Because of all we talked about, sometimes there's this, screenwriting is mysterious, but when you get to write and also are able to be an artist and draw and write with pictures, that's something you're already doing, then you get a superpower. And that's why we titled this panel like this, because I see, like, I don't draw. I mean, I draw sometimes, but I also sing in the shower, so it's not a singer. But I see in you, like many of you, that you're refraining from telling your stories when you have everything you need. And you actually have a superpower. You can do the two things. You can write with pictures, and I think, Peter, that's been like what you were.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny with me. I've kind of hopped back and forth between both. I mean, I had storyboarded for a long time, but I also wanted to write. So I just started teaching myself to write, and just a long, hard slog, you know, doing both. But honestly, you know, you've got to understand story. You've got to understand you've got to understand the principles of writing, you know, which don't always have to be expressed in words. I mean, in fact, I would say, you know, working in animation really showed me, you know, how many different kinds of, you know, writing there are with all the different phases that you go through in production. I think, you know, production design is a kind of writing. Costume is a kind of writing.
It's all story.
You know, all of it. Editing is definitely a kind of writing. So it's, I think, expanding the way you think of what writing actually is, beyond just like, you know, a lot of like fancy schmancy, you know, smart sounding words on a page, and just getting into, no, it's like you look at structure and drama and mood and all these other elements that are, you know, those are the things that really stick with you in a movie.
One of the things that super shocked me, when I was at Cal Arts, I went there in 94, from 94 to 2000, so I was there 6 years, and there's no screenwriting in animation, in character animation or experimental animation. And I remember going, wait, why? Why are we not learning the screen trade? And the teachers would go, well, because all of you love to draw. And all of you don't want to do that. So when we had them, no one went. And this horrible tradition of, don't worry, you eventually will meet a writer, or a studio will hire a writer and will pair you up. So people in their head were like, well, I don't need to know how to write, they'll just hire a writer for me. And it usually doesn't work like that. And when I started looking at directors and showrunners who were artists, but who also wrote, at least to me, when I deciphered the path, I was like, oh my God, those are the unstoppable forces, if they can do both, right? So Phil is a perfect example. When I saw what Chris and him did with Clone High, it was one of those like, wow, this is really funny, and it's an incredible show that takes advantage of animation. By the time I saw Cloudy, I was like, oh, this is a feature version of that, and then the evolution of these guys was incredibly remarkable, and the secret of all this stuff. And I think it's also one of the tragedies of this stuff is that most of us, I would say 99% of us, got into this because of the visuals, right? Because we like to draw, and we like to paint, we like to do all the visual stuff. And we have story ideas in our head, and we have story innately with our work. The problem is we spent so much time developing the craft of the visual, and we don't spend that time developing the craft of writing because it's not as fun to us, and it's obviously not fun. So when you go, well, I'm a brilliant drawer, and I'm a brilliant storyboardist, and I'm a brilliant painter, of course I'm a brilliant writer. But the work, the million hours, the Chuck Jones 1,000 drawings, haven't happened in writing. And so just because you're good at one thing doesn't immediately mean you're incredible at this other thing. And the secret to anything all of us do is the more you do it, the better you get at it, right? So how many scripts have you written, Chris? I mean,
I
Phil.
don't know. Every script we've written like 100 times over.
And,
so it depends how you score it.
Yeah, and How I Met Your Mother. Like how many?
Yeah, like Chris and I wrote, in television, like sitcoms for like a decade before we did Cloudy.
That's a decade of writing, right?
And that discipline is all like sitting in rooms with people, like
Right.
on, there's like Monday morning, you read the script out loud with the cast, and then from then until Friday when you shoot it, you're just like, oh no, oh no, everything is bad. We have to, and so you learn to rewrite things really fast. On How I Met Your Mother, for that first season, shot in front of a live audience. So you would be sitting there and go like, all right, we wrote this joke, and there's like, there's going to be 4 callbacks to it, and then in the first scene they do the first joke and it bombs, and you're like, crap, we have 5 jokes to rewrite, and we have to write this one right now. So we would huddle up and throw out ideas, and great, you had 60 seconds for take 2, and then if it worked, you felt amazing, but you got good at coming up with ideas quickly. The other thing is that like every story artist is a writer-director, right? That's how you do that work. The thing that is harder and harder is like, how do you tell a feature-length story, or how do you tell like a larger, a half hour, whatever. So nobody knows how to do that.
Right, and
I don't know how to do that.
I remember you guys telling me about how the first version of Cloudy was like the most hilarious.
So funny. Every sequence was hilarious, and the whole thing was so boring you fell asleep in 10 minutes. And it's because you didn't know, we didn't know how to make you root for a relationship across a whole movie. In fact, we were like embarrassed of like father-son stories and stuff like that. And now I have a deeper appreciation for the clockwork of those movies and how important they are, because we need you to pay attention.
Right.
Now, another reason many people that maybe are artists stop is that when you get down and start writing, it's really, really hard. So you think, well, maybe I don't have what it takes. And I've heard this quote about, I think it was Ira Glass that shared about the gap. The reason that when you see something and it's really bad, embarrassingly bad, is because you have taste, which means that's a good news. You just need to close this gap between the taste and your skill. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
I remember the first time, so all of you who are in film school and are making shorts, you've unofficially written those, right? And many of you probably didn't write a script version of it. You just started boarding it or started doing it straight ahead. When you graduate and someone goes, hey, can I read your samples? You have to have something. So what I did was I literally went and took all my student shorts and I wrote them into script form and went, oh, this is terrible. And I started doing rewrites on, like I got to remake really fast my student shorts. And then I started going, oh, that's what was wrong with it. And you start seeing it on the page and you start going, oh, that line could have been so much better if I would have done this. So that's super helpful. And then another big one that happened to me was people told me, and this is all online, for me it was the James Cameron Alien script. Someone said, just read that while you watch the movie. And the problem with a lot of these scripts is they're written after the fact. But if you can find the shooting script, and then you read that, and then you watch the movie, and then you start tracking what changed, why it changed, I think that is the best film school in the universe. So when you read these like published screenplays of movies, they do those afterwards. Those movies weren't written perfectly, and then they have, especially in animation. The reality of animation is you get a pretty good version of the movie in script, and then once it gets on reels, you start rewriting, and you start rewriting, and you start rewriting, and every iteration tries things, and sometimes you go, oh my God, this is a perfect second act, but it leads the movie somewhere we can't go on third act. Or, oh my God, this first act is incredible, but now we're because it won't pay off. So I'm of the belief that you should start with the end. You should always start with what is the heartbreaking, laughing, incredible, profound, life-shattering ending, and then backwards, how do I get to that? And in a meal, it's not the same, right? Because dessert is not the most important thing. But when you make babies, the most important thing is the end.
Result.
You make writing sound a lot more interesting
More fun.
than when I do it.
Peter, is it writing harder than storyboarding for you?
In a sense, because I mean, you know, kind of starting from nothing. Yeah, that's always hard. I mean, wow. It can be agonizing sometimes, but you know, it's you just kind of have to beat your head against the wall, honestly, or not think about anything at all until something kind of downloads. Let your subconscious do the work. And for me, you know, if I'm struggling with something all day long and I just can't get it, I just have to realize, oh yeah, step back, go to sleep, take a shower, whatever. In the morning, you know, hopefully something's going to download, and your subconscious is working all night or all week or whatever it is, and when you least expect it, some little nugget is gonna like just appear, and that'll give you like the tiniest little crack in the window, and you can see the sunlight. But the other part of it, which we kind of touched on a little, and when Phil was talking about his experiences on How I Met Your Mother, getting stuff in front of other people, I think is invaluable to get you to shed some of the preciousness, to get you looking at aspects of something that you're working on in a different way. I mean, I remember the first feature script I ever tried to write was this crazy, overambitious science fiction thing, like everybody else. And I had a friend who was like a wannabe producer. We were both like in our early 20s. And my friend Daryl, man, he was like, he was going to be the next, I don't know, Joel Silver or whatever. You won't know who that guy is, but trust me, back then he was big. But anyway, so he would redraft my scripts and give me all these notes. And it was like, I don't know that he's got any better taste than mine, or if he actually knows any more than me or whatever. But just the fact that somebody was bouncing something back to me and had a point of view on it that, made me look at it from a different angle, it was really helpful. I think I did like 6 or 7 drafts of that thing, kind of bouncing back off his questionable notes, but I learned so much about, because I'd always go, what are you talking about, man? If you look at page 15, I said that, and then I look at page 15, you know what, it really wasn't that clear. Maybe that's because somebody's just saying it and nobody's doing anything about it, so you go back and you rethink it. So all that to say, don't be a little precious, delicate baby with your writing, show it to other people, get feedback, and let it out into the world and see what happens.
Phil, how do you and Chris do the back and forths?
It depends. We've gotten busier, so more frequently we're writing sequences apart from one another and then swapping them, rather than like being in a room. The important thing is like these, like the stories that have like survived for like hundreds of years, they've been workshopped,
Oh yeah.
right? Like the Odyssey was like workshopped. He like went around and like sang it, and it was like, oh man, maybe 12 hours is too long for like a song. Maybe it should be 10. So, so like to make something in a vacuum to me is very silly. Yeah. I always say these movies are made with our brains, but we watch them with our bodies. And so the more frequently you can find a way to activate your body and like listen to how it responds to a story. We all have an innate story sense as human beings, as like Homo sapiens. It's the thing that like made us like, get this far as a species, because it was like, hey, hey Peter, that cliff over there? Yeah, Bill, I got too close to the edge, he fell over. It was a terrible story. That's like the survival technology that got us here.
Right.
So we have that, and we need to be able to like tell the story to one another, even if it's like when I have writer's block. Like a buddy of mine told me, he's like, "Oh, you have writer's block? You're not talking to enough people." It was during the pandemic.
Oh,
he was like, "Go to the beach, like talk to a friend, pitch them out the story." Yeah. And you have to activate your mirror neurons, right? The sensitive part of your body that's checking in with somebody else about what they think of what I'm saying and if it's landing and how they're experiencing that. So it really is a group. Like filmmaking is a team sport, but so is writing. Yeah. It is really a group experience. And I haven't met a person who's got such a strong innate story sense that they just like spit it out.
Perfect
And
every time.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure they're there, but they're not on this dais.
It's so funny you bring this up. This is one of my favorite things is asking people how they met, couples, or asking people like about their first fight or some first time they did something, because you are getting to hear a story that's been told hundreds, if not thousands of times. And so this story has been edited and rewritten and maximized. All the fat has been trimmed out. All the great moments have been emphasized. And so ask your grandparents, ask your parents, literally the first time you did this, or, hey dad, I always ask my dad, like, hey, before you met my mom, what was the worst, experience you had with a lady? And hearing his version of that, and then asking my mom the same thing, like, you get these incredible stories. And now it's my turn, right? When I get asked, like, how did you meet Sandra? I have that story down. Depending on the group, I'm like, I have the 5-minute version. I have the director's cut that's, 7 minutes. I have the X-rated version for when I'm super drunk. And all these stories, you've told them over and over and over. And so what you're saying is, how do we take that and apply it to the craft? And it's just time and iteration.
And
right?
one of the things that has been, I don't know what you guys think, that has been a little bit adrift is like when we started Cloudy, like you pitched your storyboard, like you pitched it with a stick and you performed it. And in so doing, you learned about that sequence. And watching someone perform it, just rehearsing it, it got better. And Chris and I had to pitch Cloudy 1,000,000 times. And we still try to develop a pitch for a movie even now because you ingest it in a different way. Right. And that's really critical that, like, even though a lot of times, like, we're tapping through sequences over Zoom now, make sure that we're performing those stories, that we're, like, when you are clicking through something, like, you've rehearsed it and it's directed, you know?
And besides the repetition, I think it's also something that tells about the structure. We sometimes I believe that we get so confused by these screenwriting books that teach you, screenwriting by the numbers, and when you hear a friend telling a story, how they met, or if you analyze that through structure, you see that's the perfect structure of a movie. It's the human structure. And so I think that it's very interesting to see how it's not about Hollywood, not even Aristotle. It's really how we are meant to experience life. And I'd love to hear about your process in structure, because I find it useful, but I think it's also misunderstood sometimes.
And Aristotle and Shakespeare workshopped there too.
Yeah, endlessly.
Endlessly.
I was pretty rebellious, like a lot of people in film school, and I was like, fuck structure. That's why all the shitty movies are the same, and all that stuff. And that's the classic, like, I don't want to learn how to draw anatomy. It's my style. That's the equivalent in story, right? You should still learn the rules so you can break them. And then the big epiphany I had was, amazing movies have structure. A lot of them don't, but most of them do. And a lot of shitty movies don't have structure, but a lot of shitty movies have structure. So it's not the structure that makes it good and bad, it's how the structure is applied. But you should still know it, right? So it was basically built into our brain in school, like, you have to hit these things. Even if you hate them, well then rebel against them by doing something counter to the thing, but the structure is still there. So now when I start, I can't help it. It's just how I think, because I've done it so many times. So I'm by the time I get to a script, I've written outlines and boarded little moments and do lists. I literally go, how did this other movie do this thing that I want to do, but I don't want to do it like them. I want to do it in a different way. So then I try to watch as many things. And I think everybody has a different process. I learn a ton from working for you guys. That one of the most shocking moments was when we were doing this Lego movie, and I pitched it to you and Chris, and then you guys were like, this is great. Now we know that version works. Start over. And I was like, what? What do you mean? And you're like, now it's less risky, because now we have a version that works. So now if you try now you're free to try crazy stuff. And that, I mean, by the way, that's what we were taught in experimental animation. Figure out how to do it, and now you know how to do it, so now try something crazy because you have a way to do it already. Now you're free. So it really changed how I approach stories.
I mean, what's funny is like the underlying like story stuff in our movies is quite conservative in a way. You know, it adheres to certain rules of what human beings are interested in.
Right.
You know, one of the things like we learned on Mitchell's is like conflict is a lot less interesting than watching people try to get along. Like that movie for so long was about two people fighting, and it became a movie about people trying to get along, and it like the scores shot up, like the engagement with that movie rockets. And that's one thing, if you want like that cheat sheet, like watching people, I just watched a movie that didn't work as well as it needed to. And one of the reasons was like in the whole second act, the characters were like thrown together and were like arguing about whether or not they were gonna be in the third act. And the whole thing is like, accept that you're gonna be in the third act.
Yeah.
And start figuring out if you're gonna have a conflict because your partner's in crime and you all know that you're stuck together, you have to, okay, it's midnight run. You can't,
Right.
you have no choice. Now you have to work together, agree to work together. Nobody wants to watch people like avoid the thing that we all came to the movie to see. Watch them try to do the thing and make mistakes along the way. But Partners in Crime is a big one.
That we kind of found our way to that on Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
You know, for the longest time we had all these different spider people, and they all do their own thing. They're not going to get along. They don't know how to be a team. Blah 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 blah. And we just could not make that interesting. And then one day that idea of "you're like me" popped up from somewhere, and stuff just fell into place. It felt so much better. It was wild.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like we live with so much conflict. Like we go to the movies to see a world where it's possible to resolve it.
Robert McKee has this theory that like American movies, you go because they're aspirational, right? You're like, if I do that, or if someone went through a struggle, they can succeed. And then European, obviously, this is his opinion. European movies are about how shitty the world is, and you should be happy with your life.
Yeah, it's not as bad.
Yeah,
it's not as bad.
Oh, at least I'm not doing that.
No. Could be worse.
You and I were talking. We were texting because I had just seen Flamin' Hot.
Yeah.
Which I love. And people love the rise and fall story, but what's even better is a rise and rise story.
Well, especially now.
It's my favorite structure, where a person wants to do something and then they do it. And I loved that movie.
I do think, and I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I think we're in a moment in time where movie storytelling is changing in front of us because of streaming, right? So when a movie was released theatrically, the audience committed. I bought my ticket. I'm going to sit down in a theater, and the movie starts, and I'm committed. I'm literally committed. I paid my money. The studio at that point is happy. If you walk out, they still got your money, right? But you sat down, and so these stories could start with a unlikable character. You were gonna sit there and get to the arc of them becoming someone better or winning you over. I think now with streaming, especially streaming first, movies that haven't been in a theater, that doesn't work anymore. Because that commitment where someone bought a ticket, you're basically going out on a date, right? In streaming, it's speed dating, right? In 20 seconds, you have to decide if you want to flip. And then in 2 minutes, you want to decide if you want to flip. So it's this version of your story where now you can't do that stuff because the audience is now predisposed to go, no, I don't like this character. Kung Fu Panda, he's dumb. I'm not going to walk through this whole thing. And so those movies are changing. Those stories are changing. And I think it's just a reality. I mean, we can moan about all these things, but that is the way things are happening. And I think the new thing that's happening now, at least what I'm witnessing, is people going, all right, in this medium, how do I tell a story knowing that I have to hook the audience in 20 seconds and then 2 minutes, because those are the metrics that we're being thrown at. And then they break it down and they go, all right, so here are your choices. And then you start feeling really limited by these ideas. But then as a storyteller and as an artist, you guys know this, the moment you're given limitations, a lot of times that's when the good stuff happens, because you start trying to break the limitations. So I think stories are changing as we speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's, literally different mediums, call for different approaches, different solutions, Yeah, I've noticed people seem a lot more invested in having ongoing relationships with characters, because of being able to binge streaming shows, I guess it was the same before with just regular TV series, but much more so the desire for that seems a lot greater now. And it makes it kind of hard to tell stories about characters who change wildly, or unsympathetic characters that you're, expected to still invest something in. But that just means, we got to think a little harder, I guess.
And Peter and Phil, can you tell us a little bit about the difference between, and also Jorge, from what makes writing for animation so special, the collaborative aspect of animation? The fact that we have an animatic, we can see the film before it's made, and compared to live action, when sometimes it's you have rewrites, but you basically hand over the script. I think that's one of the most magical aspects of writing for animation compared to live action.
I mean, I always say that the next part of the process makes the previous part obsolete, right? And in animation, we make the movie backwards. First, right? Like, first we edit it, right? Then you shoot it, and then you mix it, and then at the very last step is you write it. Which means that, like, you're constantly responding to, like, an image or a pose, or just the way somebody, an animator, like, made the character carry themselves, and that can be so much more powerful than any, like, cutesy bit of, like, dialogue you wrote, and it makes you want to change the whole scene. I mean, Peter and I lived it together on Spider-Verse, where, like, you go, man, we're sitting in a theater, something about this kid and his parents, it's unbreakable. Like, we can't, and we try as hard as we can't ruin it. And maybe that's what the movie has to be about. It's not about all these other spider people. It's about this kid, and the fact it's about a kid, and the wild thing about him, the most special thing about him, is that his family is intact. And it was the thing that people were the most interested in watching.
But I mean, you don't always start with that. I mean, we definitely didn't. We didn't know for sure. So sometimes you're going to start working on something, and you don't really know what it's actually about until you've gotten in there and fought with it and tried, 80 different versions and done all the beating your head against the wall you're going to do. And themes start to emerge that you weren't 100% sure about before, or a structure starts to want to be there that you didn't completely see before. I mean, I think a lot of the stuff that gets over mystified about writing is the idea that you have to know all that stuff in advance, and you don't. You can end up with something that has an exquisite structure, but that's just because you cut away all this clutter and it started asserting itself. It started, Phil always used to say, the movie tells you what it wants to be. You just have to listen to it. And it's the same with a piece of writing, whether it's a short or a feature or whatever. If you're kind of aware and sort of attuned to what you're doing, and you can let go, or at least try to let go of too many preconceived notions, the movie will start talking to you.
I also definitely think, early on, if you should try to watch things and try to figure out why you love them. Right? Like, try to break down, why do I love this? And that happened to me early on when I was deciphering, like, why did Amores Perros or Tu Mama También, like, why did these Mexican movies leave Mexico and all these other movies didn't leave Mexico? And why did Amelie leave France? And why did Seven Samurai leave Japan and was a worldwide phenomenon? And basically what I deduced, which is super obvious, was that these filmmakers and these storytellers were from these really specific countries, but their movies were universal in their themes. So the movies weren't about the culture and they weren't about the country. They were about universal themes of characters. So, Seven Samurai, dying class of warriors who defends ungrateful and some grateful farmers from bandits. That could take place in the Mexican Revolution, that could take place any era. Amelie, weirdo girl who gets joy from bringing people together and in the end is rewarded with love. That could take place in Pasadena, that could take place anywhere. And so once you start breaking that down and you realize the culture's the canvas and the story painted on top is universal, and this idea, and I became obsessed with Reservation Dogs. And my favorite thing about Reservation Dogs, anybody who hasn't seen it, it's incredible. But it's you felt privileged to be in this culture that I knew nothing about. So I felt like I got invited to someone's party. And as I looked at this beautiful, gorgeous painting of this culture that has been around me but I was not aware of, the closer I looked at this painting, the more I realized, oh, it's a mirror. It's a mirror of the human experience. And it's stories about fathers and sons and friends and people dying and how they react to it. And all those things are universal. So I think for a lot of us coming from other countries where we go, how do I tell the story of where I'm from in a way where everybody can get it? That's how you do it. You make it universal. You make the themes universal. And Spider-Verse to me was the perfect example of that, where even people who could give a shit about Spider-Man felt father, son, mother, dynamic, kid growing up, empathy to mentors, to people outside of his comfort, coming from literally different dimensions to teaching things. And that is the universal part of that movie. Like my mom saw it and she loved it. And she doesn't know who Spider-Man is.
So I have to ask Phil something, and it's going to sound like I'm blowing smoke, but it's always kind of fascinated me. When I first got involved with Spider-Verse, this is when I was storyboarding for Bob, before I came on as director. You had written a document, it was just a few pages long from what I remember, that kind of was like a pitch document for the movie. Do you remember that?
I know, I've lived so many
I know,
lives since
so
then,
long
Peter.
ago. But I have to say,
Multiverse film.
I read this document, and it was so emotional. There was something in it that was just so I don't know, man, like vivid and vibrant. And I was like, this is a Spider-Man movie? What? And so I want to kind of ask you, because for me, that kind of became a North Star for the feeling to shoot for all the way, the whole next 2.5, 3 years working on the movie. I would just go back and remember how I felt when I read that thing. So when you were your first thoughts on the movie, what was in there? What do you remember? What the main bullseye you were going for was?
I mean, if it was a treatments are always horrible. They're horrible to write. Expository writing is misery. Right? They're horrible and they're long. So when we write treatments, we try to make them fun, and we try to skip over the plot and just go forget the plot. We'll figure out the plot. Nobody wants to know the plot. They want to know the story. The story is one where and the pitch for that movie was and it came together in 5 minutes, which was Amy said, do you want to do an animated Spider-Man movie? We said no and hung up. And then Chris and I were at lunch. I said, well, and over an appetizer, we were like, well, what if it's Miles? Okay, what if Peter has to be a teacher? And he's always been in the back of the class. And what if Miles feels isolated? And again, it starts with an emotional idea. Miles feels isolated because he's the only one in his family. Miles in the comics is a charter school student, so he's going to a magnet program, and no one from the neighborhood is there. So I was like, oh right, that was my experience growing up, and it was Chris's, and we understand what that feels like, and it is a universal thing that like you can experience, like I'm outside of my comfort zone and I need a lifeline. And who's going to give it to him but the shittiest lifeline that ever lived? Like a fat, tired dad Spider-Man. And so we were like, that's perfect, because they both have something to prove, they both don't know what they're doing, and they both need each other. And so that was like the basics. And then we did write, at the beginning of the script, we wrote kind of a statement of purpose, which I've never really done before. But in this case, and I wish I could remember what it had in it. But the main premise of it was like, why are we making the movie? And let's put something on the first page that helps everybody understand emotionally, like, what are we doing here? And it was more or less like, we want to know what the difference is between a kid who thrives and a kid who doesn't. And everywhere I looked, I mean, I called teachers, I called like professors, I called people to try to find out the answer. And the basic answer is attention. You know, and do they know that people are looking out for them? And it can be your family, and it doesn't have to be, but that was the thing that animated all of the writing afterwards. Is like, let's help people understand when they walk out of the movie, can they have a better idea how to take care of each other and how to raise a kid than they had on the way in. On the Lego movie, it was, can we make a movie that makes you more creative on the way out than you were on the way in? You know, and those are like outlandish, outrageous, you know, megalomaniacal, you know, reasons to make a movie. Neil Blomkamp said, if you want to change the world, don't make a movie. But it really helps when you have to get up on Sunday morning and like get back on the computer. So we try to remember those core principles, you know, when we're trying to figure out like an action scene.
Yeah. Came through for me, I'll tell you that much. Yeah.
I wanted to hear from you what suggestion you would give to this audience, like many artists that have artistic skills and they're ready to tell their stories, but sometimes they don't know where to begin with writing or shaping the story in general.
All right, I love Kung Fu movies, and I've always loved this quote, and it's, a master is someone who can hide their weaknesses, but a grandmaster uses their weaknesses as their strength, right? So if you can develop writing as a skill, and you're an incredible artist, then you are unstoppable. And the only way to develop your writing skills is to put as much effort in it as you did with your drawing skills. So read the books. Literally read, you know, Robert McKee, and read screenwriting, and read like Save the Cat. Even if you hate all that stuff, just read them. That's another one. If you want to write, you got to read. There's no way around it. And then form a group of people like-minded like you, and treat them as a support group, because asking somebody to read your writing is like asking them to take you to LAX while your car's on fire. So give and take. And then the big one, if you can, start making stuff, right? You write a one-pager, and then go and write a 5-pager, and then do a 10-pager. And if you really want to start doing stuff, go, all right, I'm going to grab my favorite visual development piece. I'm going to write a 3-page script of that moment. And you start treating the writing like it's part of your artistic development. And what we were just saying right now about, if you apply all those structure and story things to your artwork, it will show. I did something backwards. I applied design theory to writing. So, you know, in design we go big shape, medium shape, small shape, contrast, you know, light and dark. So when I write, that's kind of what I try to do. I try to write these scenes as moments, and I try to get to all right, if this is going to be really sad, I got to make sure it's really funny right before it, so that the sad really hits. Which is contrast, right? If you have a sequence and then you want to get somewhere really bright, then you better go somewhere really dark before you get to the bright stuff. So you start applying all that innate art theory to your writing, and guess what? Your writing is just another art form that you get to apply it to. I'm also big into rhythm, especially in cutting. So when I write, I apply that. So for you guys who've seen my stuff, I'm a maximalist. I like a lot of stuff. And I like up-tempo in editing. So I slow down for emotions, and then I speed the fuck up for action. And by doing that, I balance the whole thing out. And so I try to do that in the writing. And then another thing that I like to do, which is different for everybody, I write every fight scene, the whole thing out for story. So I go, all right, so my 3-act structure in my fight will be this. Right. What's my low point? What's my high point? That's where the hero thinks he's going to win, but he's going to lose. And then last twist at the end, blah, blah, blah. We write all those things out, and then we go to the board artist. You don't have to do everything we describe, but here are the emotional beats of the fight. And then the fight, before it starts and before it ends, the world has to change for these characters. If you can take out the fight and it didn't change anything, then that fight doesn't belong there. And for example, in Spider-Verse, all the fights matter, right? Like, it's almost like they're internal and external.
I mean, now they do.
But that's my advice. Like, basically, you gotta get your hands dirty, you gotta jump in there, and you gotta do it, and do it so much that it becomes second nature, just like drawing became second nature to you in color theory and construction and anatomy, all these things that you don't even think about. That's kind of what you have to do with writing, and the best version of this is you write your pilot and you turn it into a studio and you go, this is what I want to make, and here's the artwork and here's the script, which is what we do now. Here's the movie we want to make, here's an outline, and here's the art. If you don't like this, tell me now, and we'll save you a ton of money.
Yeah.
And now you're in control. You're literally in control of where you make stuff, what you're gonna do. And of course, the world keeps changing and things keep evolving, but these are skills that are forever. And the more you develop them, and the earlier you develop them, if I could go back in time, honestly, people ask me this all the time, and I used to say, I would change nothing. It's been great, all the fuck-ups and all the mistakes and going to jail, all these things made me who I am today. But I did go to jail. But now I go, if I could go back, I would slap me in the face and say, start writing now. You're gonna thank me in 12 years. But start writing, start developing that muscle.
They can't take away what you learned.
Yeah.
And then you taught me something about action sequences that you said that Jim Cameron had said to you, which is like, if one person's winning, everybody's winning.
Yeah.
If one person's losing, everybody's losing.
Yeah.
As you were drawing and writing the whole third act of Spider-Verse in a room. My advice is keep the stage directions short.
Like the advice.
Like literally, that's one of the most important things you can do is like, if I can read that page in 10 seconds, that's so valuable.
Yeah.
Think of it, you're giving this thing to somebody. Okay, I promise I'll read it. It's Sunday night. It's between this and like a football game, right? There's like, we're leaving a wine ring on the page 50. So like, if that reads as breezy, if there's negative space on the page.
We love that.
It's so big. If the stage directions are concise and expressive, and I'd rather be expressive than short, but I'd rather be short than anything. Like, if I can get the vibe and I'm not diagramming this, we're not storyboarding it, we're just deciding whether we follow the story and whether we like it or not. That's the whole thing. Keep it really fucking short.
Haiku.
The other Hemingway for stage directions, exactly right. The other thing I'd say is don't waste any more time worrying or wondering if you have what it takes, because you do. You're a human being, which is the best writer in the entire animal kingdom. Could a bear
Barely.
write a screenplay? No.
Yeah. You bears.
No matter how much cocaine it ingested. So,
Now on streaming and home video everywhere.
Yeah. So, understand that this is an innate thing that we all have, that we have momentarily outsourced to Netflix, but like we all have it. And before that, before recorded media, we would all like learn stories and tell them around a campfire, right? And so, and like, what's the Kubrick movie where the officers like all do the they all do the play.
Full Metal Jacket?
They all do the play for each other. No. Kirk Douglas. Anyway.
The Killing?
Keep going. Thank you. I'm very old. Paths of Glory. Don't they go to the Officers Club and they all like put on a show for each other? Like the idea that like in the most the most violent possible time, that stories were that important, that it was strategic for an army to put on a play, right? Yeah. The fact that like these things are so valuable should tell you something.
There's a David Lynch quote that I love, and it says, a professional screenwriter is an amateur who didn't give up.
Yeah. That's literally all it is, honestly. I mean, and you know, if you're good, if you're bad, you know, if you're a writer, if you're writing something and you finish it, guess what? You're a writer. You know, you could be a bad writer for a while and get better. I mean, I've got a whole drawer of like, you know, crappy scripts that, you know, I'd be ashamed to show anybody now. But I learned so much from, you know, being crappy. You know, you've got to wade through that period. And it's fun anyway. You know, Jorge was saying read everything and ingest everything. And I say, yeah, like it's really fun, like, you know, reading all those different books. And a lot of them, you know, you're not going to agree with or they're not going to make sense. But you can kind of take the parts that do resonate with you and run with those. You know, you don't have to follow one set of instructions, unless you find one set of instructions that really works for you. But you can take from everywhere. Take what works for, what feels like it works for you, and go with that. And just like, you know, get out there and do it. Whether it's a 1-pager or a 3-pager or a feature script, whatever it is, just try to have a sense of openness. I was going to say fun, but really, I think what I really mean is a sense of openness about learning what you can and not feeling like there's only one set of answers, because there's not.
If Chris were here, he'd say, I like to write the bad version first. Get it out of the way.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. This is a great way to end. And so now I hope many people here gets inspired to go home and start their stories. And
do it.
Please.
So thank you so much, guys. This was wonderful.